Hello, everyone. Welcome to this second panel of this engineering leadership track. My name is JB. You might have seen me at the beginning doing a quick intro keynote, and I'm super thrilled today to be welcoming three amazing panelists to discuss a very important challenge. So we have Emuye Reynolds, Head of Engineering at Superhuman, Luc Vincent, EVP of Engineering at Autonomous Driving at Lyft, and Anand Mariappan, VP of Engineering at Impira. So today we'll tackle in this panel, a very timely challenge, which is managing and leading remote teams. 2020 has obviously brought its own set of challenging and forcing engineering teams and the world overall to switch to a remote setup from kind of like one day to the other. A lot of challenges, but I think, what we want to communicate today as well is that it also unveiled a lot of like new opportunities, and hopefully today you can learn from those three amazing leaders. So without further ado, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and so we can get started. So Luc, do you want to start?
Sure. Yes. Hi, I'm Luc Vincent, EVP of Autonomous Driving at Lyft, where I lead the team called Lyft Level 5, focused on building autonomous cars for rideshare. You may have read we were recently acquired, in fact, by Toyota. Prior to Lyft, I spent about 12 years at Google, where, among other things, I built a Street View team and led it to become a kind of a billion user property for Google. Very excited to be here.
Thanks, Luc. Next up, Emuye.
Hi, everyone. Also very excited to be here. I'm the head of engineering at Superhuman, where we're building the fastest email experience in the world. I've been at the company for about 5 years. We have about a 25-person engineering team, and I've been doing engineering management, and product management for about 15 years. Hello, everyone.
Welcome. And last but not least, Anand Mariappan.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Anand. I'm a VP of Engineering at Impira. It's a Series B company focused on building machine learning models to extract data from documents. Prior to this, I spent like 2.5 years at Reddit and 8 years at Microsoft. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Anna. We're also pleased to have you today. So let's get started, and we'll start with you, Luc, because you have experience building remote teams both at Lyft and Google before that. So in your opinion, what are some of the key successes, and what is key to the success in your opinion?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, JP. So I would say first, you have to ask yourself why you're doing this in the first place, right? And I think typically you'll find it's access to talent. We are often, Silicon Valley centric, but the world is a big place and you can't hire everybody here. At some point you get to a size where it makes sense to grow. So in fact, it's something that at Google, Larry Page pushed for very early. And I remember in the mid 2000s, he envisioned already having over 100 engineering offices around the world, which actually turned out to be pretty challenging to manage. So, in the process of building these offices, we developed more of kind of a playbook, a set of best practices. One is, you seed the culture of the office with some trusted people. Either you hire them locally, you know them from before, you worked with them, or you actually send people from the mothership, over to the remote office and have them, sort of help with things like hiring and other aspect of the culture. You also, I think, need to over-communicate, right? That's a rule with remote offices. They always, feel like they're disconnected. People get more anxious. So, doing twice as much communication as you think you need is something you should always think about. And then I would say maybe even more important, the remote teams need to own something meaningful and big. They can't just do something that's like a side project, or that's like maybe an extension of another team at the mothership. They have to own a piece of the action that's meaningful. And the key here is, I think, to structure it in a way that does not require, I would say, high bandwidth communication between them and other parts of the organization. If you do this, then it's going to be a challenge, especially with time zone differences. And no matter what, you have to establish, I think, the expectations. So a few years ago, for example, at Lyft, we set up an office in Munich. Why? Again, because we knew of really great talent in the space of mapping and localization, want to bring them in, and we also wanted to access more of this local talent. In doing this, we had them again own those two pieces: mapping, which is the problem of creating a geometric map of the environment, and localization, where self-driving car will actually use this map to localize itself very accurately. That was great. I like with their expertise. It was meaningful. But as we started actually deploying this tech and using some of the localization, testing in Palo Alto, we found bugs. And these bugs, when we found them, people in Munich were already, out of the office. So we're having dinner with their family and couldn't help fix them. So it created friction, tension between teams. And so we realized this pretty quickly. And the solve was to just adjust the charter of the team. We moved localization to Palo Alto, right? And then we expanded the mapping charter in Munich to include not just geometric mapping, but also to include the semantic piece. And that made everybody much happier. So these are some thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, definitely. So like the idea of owning something big is really important to make that team like part of the thing, not just like a side with the team
Absolutely.
on the side. Yeah, so it's super important. Brings it all set of challenges apparently. Anand and Emuye, so you two are most likely leaning towards a hybrid model with people in the office and also some people fully remote post-pandemic. What is, in your opinion, what a major challenge in the setup? Emuye, if you want to quickly share one.
Yeah, there have been a number of challenges, but I think as you pointed out, there's a lot of opportunity there. One challenge that I was surprised by is, so we have a number of people. We started in San Francisco, so a lot of our team is in San Francisco and has already formed connections. And over the last year, we've hired a number of other people, both in San Francisco Bay Area and all across North America. And so one of the things that was really interesting is there's a set of people, both from pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, who really want to meet. And then you have a set of other people who are less comfortable meeting in person. And so creating experiences that balance has been quite challenging, right? We don't want to host a bunch of in-person events, alienating the people who aren't comfortable going. But at the same time, we don't want to prevent the people who are interested in meeting from actually connecting in that way. So we tried a number of things. We've tried satellite events across the country, small group neighborhood events we've done, which was kind of interesting. More recently, we were doing larger, almost all company type of events. And the first time we did it, we had just completely independent all company, people sort of like calling in. So there's an in-person component and a remote component, but it was very separate. And it was really hard to coordinate, it's really hard to hear. We had like laptops at the park kind of thing. And I think the most successful large event that we've done that sort of had unique experiences was just a few weeks ago. We started with a remote component. So everybody, regardless of where they were meeting, could be a part of a single thing. And then we broke into separate experiences. And I think that worked quite well to kind of bring everyone together and make it sort of like a unified experience. But it's been really interesting balancing those different comfort levels and interests in terms of meeting in person.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing and providing some solutions here, Emuye. Anand, some things you want to add?
Yeah, thinking about remote work or hybrid work, like you've been working in this sort of like distributed office and satellite offices for a long time. Like the new variable that comes in is this hybrid nature. Like some people are working from home, some people are going to come to your headquarters, some people are still going to be in your satellite offices. So two big challenges that come to my mind are like creating a sense of belonging and being inclusive. And just double clicking on the one, like being inclusive, what does that mean? Like everyone has the same level of access for opportunities. And this is extremely important because for creating an environment where like people are fully engaged in your environment is extremely important. And I'll call it two simple things, like two examples, like one that went a little bad in our company and one that was a success. So being inclusive, like this was like last summer, and like in my company, we were looking for an engineering lead. And so I was talking to one of my engineers and he talked about like he wanted to be there. Like, and I had a recency bias, and when an opportunity came out, like I was like, hey, do you want to be the lead? And he said yes. And turns out like a month later, I had one of my engineers who left my company. And then when I talked to him, he said like, hey, if I knew there was an opportunity, I would have probably signed up for that as well. So like avoiding that. So that was like a really good learning experience for me. And then recently, like we had like a few second batch of our interns come in, and I learned from that mistake. And like before even picking the opportunities, I made sure like we posted it in our Slack general channel saying, hey, here are the opportunities that's coming in. We're looking for an intern manager, intern buddy, please sign up who are interested. So that way, like everyone knew these opportunities are coming up. And then we like 4 people signed up, and I wouldn't have even anticipated that one engineer would be like interested in doing that role. So trying to create this inclusive access for everyone is super important, and that's one big challenge. Yeah.
And be super intentional about it, more intentional than maybe you would have been in another case.
Exactly.
Luc?
Yeah, the remote work has been, of course, challenging for all of us. A few things that you have, in my view, work better remotely. And one thing is like these, all hands or large meetings we used to have where you had the in crowd in the building that, was, there physically, and then some people dialing in remotely or dialing in some of, a different office. It was always awkward, and these people were never quite fully in the meeting the same level. So now, as we are all, one small, video, square on the screen or do things as broadcast, it actually leveled the playing field. It actually works better in my experience. What you miss really there is like the more serendipitous, meeting of people around the water cooler, or like more social events are very difficult to emulate. There it takes you going out of your way to meet people, and so that means, in my case, scheduling more and more one-on-one meetings with people. Shorter meetings, but more of them, which gets exhausting. So office hour, things like this. But going back to the first point, I think large meetings, with people being remote, work quite well. I am curious to see how we're going to adapt, as we come back to the office, some of us, and some stay remote. We have to keep some of this, so we'll have to adjust, and I don't have the full answer yet on what will work best.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Lit. And yes, office hours, something even that we started doing kind of natural as well recently. We're much smaller, so I think that's something to experiment with. So before I get into like a follow-up, like feel free everyone to add a question directly in the Q&A there. I will be asking them to our panelists in a few minutes. Let's talk about hiring as well, because it's been a huge challenge as well. Anand, could you tell us some of the challenges you've had and how you solve them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, hiring is a unique challenge, right? Like, especially for an early stage startup, like we don't have an early brand, like, so we have to be super creative about it. On top of it, hiring made like a few things challenging. So I'll talk about one particular candidate we closed. It was like pretty unique in my perspective. And the reason it was unique is like this candidate interviewed with us like early this year, January of 2021. And the time it took her to sign the offer was like early April. So that's like about 3 months. Like having hired like about 50 people across Reddit, Microsoft, and even at Impira, like that was like a unique thing. And a few things had stood out for me there. One, even though like the candidate really enjoyed talking to everyone, like there was a big hesitation around like, hey, this is going to be a remote onboarding experience. So she was like a little bit hesitant about like what will be the onboarding experience. And the way we overcame with that was in having the candidate talk to quite a few people in the company who just started recently, people who have been in the company for a long time, like what are the challenges, and being extremely upfront about like some of the challenges running into it. And the other unique thing that we did in our process is like we don't have any offer deadlines. That's something I've introduced here at Impira, which is like joining a startup is like, again, a big risk, and yeah, there's a huge reward, but like having this artificial deadline, okay, you get like a week, decide by this Friday, if not, you're not going to get this offer, is not something I think is the right thing, like especially with COVID happening, like people have these hesitations. So as a key hiring process for me is like engaging with the candidates from the beginning of the process, have them meet many people in the teams, and understand what are their hesitations and address one by one, and like be patient with your hiring. So
thanks for sharing, Anand. Emuye, do you want to bounce off of that?
Yeah. First, I'll just say I really like this idea of getting rid of the exploding offer. I've never really been a fan of that particular practice. We've definitely had some interesting challenges on the hiring side. Pre-pandemic, we knew we wanted to be a remote company at some point, but didn't really prioritize it. We did experiment with partnering with some different companies that facilitate satellite offices. And so for a period of time, we were running a whole host of remote interviews. And we found that the pass-through rates for those interviews were significantly lower than many of our other in-person interviews. And so one of the things that we've had to do over the course of the last 15 or so months is really change those practices, try to at least hit industry standards for those pass-through rates. We've lengthened the interviews. We've introduced to your point on social components, and it's kind of interesting because on one hand it can be quite awkward. You're in this room and you're in this virtual room with all of these people you haven't met, and the pure goal is to create a social connection in 30 or 45 minutes. But we found that it's much more successful than not having that component. So those are a few things that we've done to try to get to the point where our hiring practices look as good and feel as good in terms of candidate experience versus when we were doing it in person. And I think there's a forcing function there, so we had to be successful, and our team has about doubled over the last year.
Okay, so a lot of hiring in the remote setup, quite interesting. Luc, so some thoughts as well around hiring in the remote.
Yeah, I'd say for me, hiring for a remote office is not significantly different from like hiring remote people. It's like the same issue. They are not local, so they can't typically often meet you in person. So you have to go out of your way to craft a story as to why they should join, and adapt to your local office. I think, to Anand's point, having to being very clear as to why they would join, what's in it for them, and then maybe having a different script for different types of people, and certainly a different script for different local versus remote people. An example, like, when we hired at Lyft, the Lyft brand is pretty well known, in the US, in California. It's totally unknown in London. Most people haven't even heard of it. And so when we started actually, building our team in London around AI, we really had to think hard about why these people should join and adjust our script. So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So another topic we're actually addressing when we prepared this call is very related to a question we have right now. So I'm just going to bring it up by side. It's about onboarding, and as we think a theme here is like really being intentional about everything you do, from like displaying like internal offers to telling your story and all of those things. And something that maybe existed before, but also like that needs to be doubled down on in the remote setup, was having like a buddy and a technical buddy during onboarding. So I think for both of you, Anand and Emuye, that has been like a successful strategy at onboarding. So if you want to share a little bit about it, Emuye.
Yeah, we used to do we still do this, cross-functional buddy. This is somebody you could a new hire could ask basically any type of question. And we explicitly chose somebody who wasn't on the same team just to make sure the person had more exposure to the company. But what we found is, we've sort of talked about this quite a bit, but this idea of forming connections and really feeling part of the team can be quite challenging for when you're onboarding in a remote situation. So we've, in addition to our cross-functional buddy and an engineering manager, we've also been introducing a technical buddy. And this is somebody who is aware of all the projects that the new hire is working on. And we've encouraged sort of proactive check-ins and reach-outs on both sides to ensure that there's, the pair is talking quite frequently. We found in the first few weeks that interacting at least once a day is really helpful, and it starts to taper off kind of depending on what makes sense for that particular pair over time. But it's something that's been, we've been getting a lot of really positive feedback about introducing that particular practice.
Yeah. Adding on to it, like we definitely do something similar, like a technical buddy. What we call as like our people team is amazing. Like, so we have this curate the first 2 weeks of the calendar. Like we intersperse like onboarding things, like get to know about the sales team, marketing team, and then specifically schedule like 15-minute one-on-ones with like quite a few people. Like in a way, like sort of mimic your coffee room interactions. Okay, these people need to talk to them. So that has been super important. And the other one, which I found super relevant for remote onboarding and also like in office setting, is like pairing them with mentorship, right? Like mentorship has been like super important. I mean, like, yes, it's Plato for mentors, but like that is one thing we found super relevant. Like buddy is someone you go to for like asking any sort of social questions. Mentor is the one who's going to integrate this person into their culture and help them grow and achieve their career ambitions.
So the buddy very present at the onboarding phase, and then a mentor as well that's mostly like going to stay more in the long term. And that's something that both at Google, at Lyft, like it's like a real thing. Like
I'm familiar with the concept of mentor, but the buddy concept is new to me, so it sounds exciting, and I would learn from these distinguished panelists, and it's something we might want to bring as well to our practices.
There's two other things that I would recommend too in terms of that we've seen work well for onboarding. The first is, this is kind of similar to what you said, Anand, in terms of having these initial one-on-ones. We've actually had a practice at Superhuman of, this isn't specific to engineering, we've done it across the company, but each person who joins actually does a one-on-one with every other person in the company. Now we've gotten too big at this point, and this actually, we transitioned during the pandemic from every other person to most close, everyone on close teams, and then about half the rest of the company. So it's been really interesting. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback on that. And I think the other thing that's really helpful when people are onboarding remotely is just, as managers and leaders, we always have to say and things and repeat ourselves over and over again and make sure we're communicating in a lot of different ways, but just really doubling down on the explicitness of our communication. We found that to be incredibly helpful. We use Notion for a lot of our documentation, and ensuring that we're writing things down and sort of linking many times in those initial onboardings has been incredibly helpful.
Thanks. Any other quick tips on onboarding that come up?
I'll probably throw one, JB. This is more if you're building like an end user product. Like one of our new hires had this idea where like she came in and she's like, okay, I'm observing a lot of new things that is not ideal in your product, and she started this document of like looking at her like fresh eyes perspective, like capturing things that are not good about the product. This is super important. Like people do that like organically, but like we're making this an explicit process, like where a new hire comes in, like starts this templated document about capturing their experience using our product and then present it to our company. So this also helps us building a better product for the company. So
sounds good. Thank you. Let me take another question, because it also reminds me of something that you mentioned, Anand, but like how do you maintain and build a culture during pandemic? And you've been very explicit about like using the values as a way to like being explicit about the values with your team.
No, this is something like I mentioned, like one of the key challenges, right? Like how do you create this sense of belonging, like when everyone is like a smaller rectangle in your Zoom, and people are going to be in different places. When you're in office or satellite offices, like people throw in these like posters, right? Like if you think about Facebook, you think about the murals that's been in the wall, like that shows the hacking mentality. Like when you're in a Zoom, like it's extremely hard to create that sense of belonging. So I think of values as your measuring stick, and the culture is sort of the glue which holds everyone together. And so it's super important as leaders, like think about values and embody them into your daily rituals. So like a couple of things that we do at Impira is like one, like we integrated with Lattice in Slack, where when you praise someone, you have to choose a particular company value that they embody. And the other one I do is like in my, every quarter I pick a theme. Like the current theme for me in Q2 is like empowering my engineering team. So it's just one of our core values. You'll probably hear me talk about empower in almost in my one-on-ones, my team meetings, like everywhere I am there, like you'll probably hear me say it. I'll try to understand like why is someone not empowered to do a thing. A very concrete example, like we were working on a product that like the team knew they were not ship it in 2 weeks, but like they felt like they're going to say like, I'm going to ship it in 2 weeks. 2 weeks comes in, you all know the story. It gets delayed by another week. A week goes by. So I felt like, okay, they felt like they knew the answer. There is an elephant in the room. How do you empower them to talk about it? So
also focusing on values.
I just want to echo what Anand suggested. I think we at Lyft have been using a tool called Fond for recognition, and when you send somebody a Fond, which is like you recognize for a job well done or for helping you out, you always also choose the company value demonstrated through this exercise. And this has been really good in sort of, again, creating this sense of shared values in the company. What we do this time, during pandemic and these remote times is we actually go one step beyond this. And every time we have in my org an all hand, we actually flash all the, some of the most meaningful Fond recognition that has been going on around the team, and recognize people sort of, in person or virtually in these meetings, in addition to just the Fond. And that again helps to enforce these values during pandemic. So I think it's probably an idea that's worth, emulating.
Cool.
Yeah.
Emuye, any thoughts around, culture and maintaining culture in a remote setting?
Yeah, I like this idea. We don't, we do have sort of a public praise Slack channel, but this idea of tying it to praise to values is quite interesting. One of the things that we found, and I think it's just, again, it's that repetition and really helping people internalize how each individual's job kind of correlates with those core values. And so we have a core values document in Notion where we actually outline some of the specific behavior that people have done across every team. So people who are joining, can refer to that and really understand how they can embody the core values in their particular role. And I think that's been quite helpful.
Cool. I think we have time for one last question. And there's one question around, for having your opinion, if you guys have preferences for recruiting full-time US-based engineers, if you prefer people outside of the US, and do you even have a strategy? Have you been thinking about this, a plan? So. Yeah, I can start. We're North America right now as a company policy. We're North America only. We don't have a particular preference for US or not US. And we have kind of we've been hiring in Canada primarily, but we have our first hire from Mexico City. And I think it's been pretty fun. Happens to be a place that a lot of people on the team are really interested in visiting. So I think there's an opportunity there for creating that connection as well. Is it mostly due to time zones, like this North America?
It's time zones, but also more on the HR and people side, just in terms of the overhead and legality for employing people in different countries. That's roughly how we structured it. Yeah. I think it's something we'll continue to revisit. But for us, again, the pandemic is the first introduction of any remote work for us as a company.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we Anand, as I say, we don't use sort of vendors. We typically use only full-time employees. We hire both in Palo Alto and in London in our case, and without the particular preference for location. It's like we hire the best people we can find wherever they are. So that is the strategy.
Yeah, very straightforward.
Quickly, I was going to add in there are two dimensions I think about this, right? Like how early or what stage of the company is in, right? Like if you're in an early stage, seed stage, you're just getting started, have the team locally. You want to create that bond, the sense of belonging. As the team scales, where Superhuman is, where Impira is, we are all over the East Coast to Pacific time zone. Because you go beyond internationally, you're going to deal with this time zone differences. So as the company scale, I'm pretty sure with companies like Lyft and really fast growing companies, it's extremely easy to deal with multiple locations and multiple time zones. Mm-hmm. And in terms of going for vendors, the one factor I'd call in is most of the companies are going to be really struggling to fill a hire, and then there's going to be really short on resources. When you're really short on resources, don't try to rush your hiring. That's when you try to augment with a vendor thing. Yes, the quality is not going to be great. It's going to be very different than building a full-time engineer. But at Impira, it took us 4 months to build our initial pipeline. We didn't try to rush hiring. We onboarded a company. They were pretty good. We built our complete redesign with them. But then now hiring is in full swing. We can rely on hiring people. So it totally depends on the stage where you are and how much are you hurting without these extra resources.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much. I think we're out of time. So there's some really cool tidbits of things that everyone can take away from this talk. So try those strategies, make them, see if it works for your company, for your culture. I really want to thank you, Anand, Emuye, and Luc, for spending the time today and answering the audience question. And that's it for our panel. Thanks again. Thanks for the questions as well. I think now there's going to be some breakouts. And have a great day, everyone.